Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 21 of the Three Body Problem, a podcast with very much improved audio quality, but that's about it. But before we get into the news, let me just check in with Juanito. You're checking in from Argentina. Echo
I
Party. I
am.
saw you. I saw you on the live streams and stuff yesterday, all dressed up. What's the vibe down there? Do we have
Honestly,
listeners down there?
we do have listeners down here somehow. Some of the 34 apparently reside in Argentina. It's been awesome. Honestly, I'll say it's even better than when we came together a couple of years ago. I think that was the first one after the pandemic, and you can see now that like the vibe is back in full swing. Uh, Super cool. Tons of students and younger folks that have gotten a ton of sponsorships for tickets just to be able to come out, and like they do all these like boot camps and things for younger folks to get into the industry. So our friend Fede and our Argentinian friends are truly amazing hosts. So it's been just a really nice experience. Like I've been very happy to come down here.
And how are you, Kostin? Checking in back from Romania. I see you're back in the home office. How are things?
Yeah, things are good. Thanks for asking. No, nothing really big happening except all the news this week
No
about
vacation?
it's coming. You know it's coming. Like
I
Christmas
saw you.
holidays.
But don't lie, I saw you yesterday on a dark reading thingy doing a keynote talk connecting physics to cybersecurity, which was pretty cool.
Oh shit! Is that recorded?
It is. So you
Okay.
can still watch it online on the
Thank-
dark reading website.
This is my. I like this. Let's talk about this.
Let's
know.
talk about the news. I want to kick it off with a story that we perhaps missed last week, but it's so full of juicy details that I'm actually surprised we missed it. It was a CISA FBI report on an Iranian group called Arya Seper Ayan Den Sazan, ASA, known as Microsoft previously called them Neptunium, or in the new weather reporting, Cotton Sandstorm. There's some pretty fascinating new FBI attribution details, and alongside that, Checkpoint issued a report on this WezRat that connects this ASA group to it. Costin, you got a chance to read this report. Are you happy you got your IOX and telemetry? What is the standout item here?
Well, you know me, I've been complaining in the past about some of these reports. Either they don't have IOX, sometimes they say they have IOX and there's no IOX, only TTPs. Sometimes the IOX are maybe not the best. There's sometimes the RR rules, but they generate false positives. Now, as I was reading this report, originally I was thinking, another one of those. But as I was reading the report, like suddenly eyes are getting wider and like, wow, this is good stuff. So yeah, I think it's a very cool report. There's a lot of new information for some of us that were tracking this activity for some time. I think I looked a bit into this back in July during the Paris Olympics. This
Back up
group
a
was,
second, if you don't mind. Back up a second and kind of like set the stage. Who's the actor we're talking about here? We're talking about an Iranian threat actor, APT, that is known and have been followed over the years. Just set it up for us.
Yeah, but I guess maybe they didn't attract that much attention as the other ones, which are, kind of famous, such as APT-35 or Newcaster. So maybe the fact that they are kind of, let's say, a bit newer than the others makes a difference. The other thing here, which probably makes it difficult, is that they did show up over the last years with many different names, like with different hacktivist operations, different hack and leak operation, selling hack data. So they've been around, let's say, with many different names. So that maybe makes it a bit more difficult to track.
If I remember correctly, though, the name that resonated with me was actually the original company name, right? The Emennet Pasargad, because we had a previous FBI report on like them being engaged in election interference, even like in the 2020 election, right? Like that's when it first kind of came up for me, and I remember from what we were reading at the time not being super impressed, whereas like this report is super interesting, right? Like that some of the TTPs that are being kind of undersold in this idea that like they're setting up like a fictitious hosting provider so they can provide for their operations. I haven't heard of that at least explicitly called out before. I think it's super interesting, right? I mean, let's start with who are you sending your like abuse reports and attempts to like try to
Exactly.
sinkhole or take over, right? Like it's super smart. And it's also very interesting to see that apparently they've been hosting like Hamas sites and stuff in Lebanon. Like it that these are the moments when I find it's the overt infrastructure of covert operations is such a fascinating place to understand how certain dynamics work, right? Like we can talk about the Iranians supporting a web of interesting bits of activity without being able to detail it. And then you look in cyber and there's like a clear connective tissue that brings these things together in a way that I really love.
One of the things that stood out to me, Costin, is this reads like very much wartime campaigning. Hijacking cameras in Israel, IP
Yeah.
cameras in Israel, live streams, the connection to Hamas that Juanito mentioned. There's just a lot more details in this FBI CISA thing that we don't normally see. Can you talk a little bit about the Hamas connection and some of that stuff? And is that new?
Uh,
Small thing here. Sorry, Kostin.
yeah.
FBI CISA INCD thing. Somebody
Correct.
had to do the work.
Yes.
Someone had to do the real work here. Let's just be clear. Kostin,
Israel
pardon the
National Cyber
interruption.
Directorate is one of the three logos on the
Mhm.
on this TLP Clear advisory. So
Yes.
Correct. We missed that. Like I think they deserve credit, and probably they did play an important role in writing this report. But to get back to what Ryan was asking, and I do think, by the way, I think that this setting up of fictitious hosting resellers is a very very interesting point, because I remember a couple of years ago that a friend of mine was trying to get some servers that he could use to do port scans of the internet. So they had like a fingerprinting algorithm for a very rare passive backdoor. They needed to scan the whole internet for it, and the way, let's say, to do that without leaking the fingerprinting algorithm would be to rent a server in one of these cyber bunkers, host-proof, bulletproof companies. And he did manage, in the end, he did manage to get one from a company that actually was advertising, and they were saying in the call, there's like, listen, in the worst case that law enforcement agencies come after your server, we will first call you. You can just log in, wipe your server clean, so there's no problems. And when you're finished, you tell us, and we make a copy. We shut down your server, make a copy, and we give it to the law enforcement. So that's
Wow.
happening. I mean, that's definitely happening, and I see why they would be doing. On the other hand, there's a risk. The moment that you identify server speed and VPS agent as being your operations, you automatically know everything there is
Everything.
probably bad. And in particular, yeah, they were providing hosting services for the Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas. Or we've seen those domains pointing in their IP range, and I think they were also working a bit with some Lebanese organizations, extremist organizations, to host them in the same space.
I,
So these are like
I've-
very very interesting details for those of us who dig into DNS data and like to look at resolutions over time. That's like a gold mine essentially.
I'll say that I'm getting like PTSD dog vibes right now, looking at the like fake messages they were sending to the families of the hostages. These were things that we investigated. I remember investigating some of those messages after October 7th, and it's such a gut-wrenching thing because right now I see the messages in a report that explicitly tells me that this is some bullshit Iranian operation. At the time, you're between like the family of somebody who's desperate to get information about their loved one and a fucking text message and no idea if this is actually coming from the people that are holding them, if this is coming from wherever. So
And
I think I just had like a
this is the first public confirmation that this ASA company was creating cover personalities to actually contact family members of these hostages in an effort to possibly cause like psychological trauma and so on. So they were more directly connected than just doing cyber operations.
well, I think it's yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like I said, Emennet Pasargad has been discussed openly before and has been connected before with other operations, but it was to me not being like a big Iran hawk per se. It was like here's a private company that's somehow part of this ecosystem that's doing some disinfo stuff. It's very different to see it as like a complete pass through for a lot of um, Israel, Hamas, and now Israel, Hezbollah war activities that doesn't leave a whole lot of room to be like this is just a private company that isn't necessarily a cutout for the Iranian government. So it is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mentioned the IP camera targeting activity. According to this report, it was like immediately hours after the October 7 attack, they enumerated IP addresses running this protocol looking specifically for live cameras. And, the report interestingly has some actual screenshots and stuff in there. So it seemed to be something that was very, very connected. Costin, what's the big takeaway here? Is there some hunting that can be done? Is there like what happens next for us as threat hunters?
I think there's a lot of hunting that you can do, and Checkpoint also published a very detailed technical report on WezRat, which is one of the custom malwares they've developed and deployed over the years. So there's a lot you can hunt of, like at the network level for these two particular hosting resellers, but also from the malware point of view, deploying Yara rules and hunting for more. I think that's on the table. If you ask me, what is the effect of this report on the group shutdown? I don't think they will just go away because of this report. Probably the point of the report is just to raise awareness. More people get to look into this and track upcoming campaigns. The way I see it, this is an entity which likes to rebrand itself, constantly come up with new personas, hack and leak operations, all the time under different names, kind of tailored to whatever is happening. So this is something to keep an eye on, if you ask me. And ideally, it would be nice if these entities, the FBI CISA, if there's going to be CISA next year, plus the Israeli Cyber Directorate release an update in 1 year or 2 years. I think that would be very good.
Juan, what do you take away from this? Is your team taking this new information? Is there any sort of additional hunting that you're doing? Is there any sort of additional detection capabilities that this helps you with?
No, I mean, there's definitely a lot to hunt on here. I won't pretend to be more aware of it than I really am, right? Like Kostin brought this to our attention like less than an hour ago, right? So this is a fascinating report. We somehow missed it, as you mentioned, Ryan, right? Like this came out 2 weeks ago. But there's some really obvious stuff, right? Like the hosting provider itself, like that alone, somebody like Tom Hagel will have a field day just running through that. I expect Silas Cutler, especially in his new role at Census, to go just do some serious shredding on some of that network telemetry. So that alone, I would expect, is going to turn out quite a bit of interesting information. I might need to like get past, like I said, my PTSD dog vibes right now as I see sort of the connections with the stuff that we were working on this past year. But I'm very interested. You keep mentioning the IP camera stuff. Two observations on the basis of that. I think it's fascinating. Once again, as we talk about coordination for the October 7th attacks or lack thereof, it's fascinating to see some central Iranian fabric not having been already on the cameras before the attack, but doing it shortly thereafter. That is an interesting thing to me. Again, as we have discussions about the autonomy of Hamas and having started the attack and then everybody kind of piling on rather than it being a big joint thing. The other part I would point out, Ryan, since you sort of kept mentioning sort of wartimey vibes, um, this to me also reminds me of just how much Predatory Sparrow has been kicking Iran's ass over the past couple of years and doing sort of similar activities, right? Of like taking over billboards and like trying
Who is
to
Predatory Sparrow? Just for
so
the audience sake, just fill it in quickly.
Predatory Sparrow, which we at S1 track as Meteor Express, is a threat actor that popped up doing some partially very trolly, partially very fascinating crossing of the Rubicon style attacks inside of Iran. We can only surmise as to who might be behind such an operation, but it's really fascinating, right? Like they stop the trains in Iran on a given day and sort of put up these trolling messages about like contacting the supreme leader's office as the trains were down due to cyber attacks. They've hit billboards inside of Iran. They have pushed sort of they're trying to kind of foment a lot of like internal revolutionary sentiment against. We suspect that they were also the ones behind the hack and leak of the Evan prison videos, which is supposed to be one of like the darkest places on earth. It's where you take Iranian political prisoners and subject them to all kinds of awful things. And then, much more notably, they took down the gas pumps in all of Iran at some point, so you couldn't get gasoline. And the most insane one is they melted down a steel foundry on video. And it look, to me, this is the most fascinating group to have popped up. It's the most fascinating threat actor to have popped up in years.
You have to
It's
imagine
not.
they've burrowed deep into everywhere in Iran,
Oh,
royally owned.
so the reason I'm so fascinated by them, and I think Andy Greenberg kind of published some of this in his story about a year ago, is that I think it has introduced the first and maybe only instance I've ever seen of cyber as a deterrent. Like that's something that academics have been and politicians and policy people have been discussing forever, and it never made any fucking sense. How is a covert capability a deterrent? Right? That doesn't make sense.
Your buddy Dakota says it doesn't work.
Yeah, and Dakota is correct for the most part, because you're talking normally what we think about as cyber operations is a uh, a hidden hand, a potential capability, a potentially disastrous thing, an unexpected black swan. Wow, they came
Signaling.
down and well, that's the thing though. You can signal vaguely through political overtures that you possess some great cyber power that will bring this other country to its knees. And if the US were to do so, which it doesn't really when it comes to cyber, you could believe it perhaps if you think they could get out of their own way with their bureaucracy. If the Dutch did it, you can believe it. But then, the Pakistanis say that kind of thing all the time, and other people say it, and you're like, okay, whatever. The Iranians will say it all the time. Which is why I think the signaling is detached from reality and capability.
This
So
is
it doesn't
beyond signaling.
actually,
This is actually turning screws and
well,
but not in a too much of a disruptive way, but
well, it can't be deterrence if you're not showing me that you actually have a capability, right? Like if you told me, if Ryan, you as an individual were like, I'm going to nuke DC if you do this, I go, well, this motherfucker's never shown us that he has a nuke, right? Like it doesn't mean anything. I say that this is the first real instance of cyber deterrence is because they're doing things inside of Iran that show that they could have done 3 times worse, and they only did this.
right,
Like with the
right.
steel foundry, they had access to 5, but they only melted 1. With the gas pumps, they could have bricked them, but they only broke them, right? Like it's things like that.
So I have
Sorry, this
obvious
is a huge,
questions. I know I have
tangent,
obvious
right?
questions, and Costin, you
Right.
can jump in here to attempt an answer as well. Is like, were they expecting something that they were trying to deter, and did it work? Like you're suggesting that this is a cyber deterrence because we only hit one of the steel foundries. Well,
To to me, the reason this is so meaningful is that it's not just that it's deterrence, but it's a way of
Did it work? And what were they trying to stop?
I can't possibly say if it worked because I can't possibly know what is happening in that conversation, what the actual means of like potential attack, retaliation, etc. was that was being handled. But I will say that for the first time in my mind, um, you have a state actor basically saying, back the fuck off because I don't have to leave my house to tear your country to shreds. And considering who is probably behind that operation, if you look at the timing of when this stuff was happening and the kind of pressures that that country was suddenly under, with many, 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 many enemies and a army that has to be in 5 different directions at a given time, that may be the most meaningful cyber capability since Stuxnet. Being able to say, back the fuck off. We have 17 different ways to tear your country apart without even having a plane take off from our country. I think it's fascinating.
I agree. I don't know if it works though, because I mean, it could just be, this could just be malicious attacks that are crossing the realm and going into physical, affecting people's lives and so on. If it's meant to be a deterrent, and the only way we know it works is if we know it was meant to deter against, and maybe something didn't happen that was on track to happen. Is this like an intelligence conversation conspiracy Ryan is trying to embed himself into?
No, I think it's just a conversation that we don't have enough information on, and we can't possibly have enough information on. What I will say is, I mean, we've seen some pretty soft-handed, like some pretty limp responses from Iran in this whole conflict over the past 18 months. Even like the drone rain that was sent from Iran, actually, like I think a day or two after I left Israel, was a largely inconsequential thing. Every single time we've seen Iran supposedly going to like rain missiles down on Israel, they never hit shit. And they're always immediately going, well, we're finished. We're done. It's over. Right? Like the Iranians are more interested on basically like putting a period at the end of that sentence, which I think is a very different attitude to the bellicose bullshit we've been getting from Iran for the past 10 years.
And that is likely to change now that we have a more hawkish administration coming into place here in the US. Costin, do you expect cyber activity in that region to ratchet up in a more meaningful way now with a new administration on board and maybe mindsets changing around, like how far we pushed it?
Well, you know me, I hope the activity will ramp up because we want to see cool things. We want to see things like that. I'm not so sure personally about the deterrence side of this predatory sparrow attacks. I was thinking, me personally, more in the sense of a kind of a psyops designed to make Iranian people unhappy with things like the railway is broken, the gas pumps are broken, the government's broken. Like probably, I think the most perhaps controversial part of that was when they were blowing up this steel foundry, and there was a guy there that could have died because essentially he kind of ran away at the last moment, and then there's this molten iron falling on the same place where he
Andy
was.
Greenberg noticed those guys. I watched that video 3 times and I hadn't seen the dudes running from
I have
from
I have
under.
it.
Yeah, I have it. I watched it 3 times and I didn't see the guys running out until Andy pointed it out. I was like, oh fuck. So it's like, right.
Yeah, so but on the other, I think on the other hand, they did say that they only ran, the attack was executed when they were confident there will be no victims, no human victims, so nobody will die. But
I think they didn't see
nevertheless,
them either.
good question, good point. I think that in the sense of
Mute your mic if you're going to type.
in the sense of things happening between Israel and Iran on both sides, I think one of the most important ideas here is that you can't expect someone overnight to have this kind of level of capabilities. So this is something that takes many years to develop, and even let's say on the other side, on the Iranian side, you see them slowly improving, slowly evolving. they're hacking like maybe insurance companies and leaking people's passports so they can be used for all sorts of petty crime topics. They hack people's data and leak it online. They run all these operations, which you may say maybe they're kind of small, but what I see here is the developing capabilities. Um, of course, the kind of things which are happening in Iran are of much bigger scale, and the attackers are way more sophisticated. But what I noticed is that these Iranian groups, not just the government, not the MOIS and the Revolutionary Guards Corps, but also these companies in Iran and sometimes like individual contractors, they're ramping up their capabilities. They are more bold. They are setting up companies abroad. They're providing infrastructure hosting for others, for other countries. So I see that they're improving. So the question is how long it takes them to build the so-called maybe nuclear capability. It will take them some time, right, to get there. How long will it take?
Do you remember the Magic Quadrant? And in the past, the APT Magic Quadrant, for the most part, we were. And I asked this question of you in the past. We've kind of discounted their ability or diminished their ability and capabilities. Do you move them up and to the right in the quadrant? Like, where do they fit now?
I would say that across different threat actors, to me, Iran is showing the highest velocity. Like they're climbing at the highest velocity compared to others. Of course, we have others which are way up and they have a lot more capabilities. But what I see here, I mean, they combine, of course, everybody is using AI nowadays, but they combine all sorts of things: disinformation, psyops, hack and leak, ransomware, destructive attacks, spying on cams, hacking IoTs, leveraging, open source tools, custom rats, multi-platform tools. So you see them moving at a higher velocity than other threat actors, in my opinion.
Juan, you agree? You or you still discount their?
No. I mean, I don't necessarily discount them. I was actually just remembering back to a talk I did at SummerCon a few years ago about the sort of I have openly discussed how much I hate the like Harvard Belfer Center Cyber Power Index, but like without going into how much it sucks, the one of the reasons that one of the dimensions I think was really missing from that kind of discussion, it's relevant to this notion of like an APT Magic Quadrant, is actually the willingness to use capabilities, and that is something that um, if we want to snub our noses as like first world cyber powers looking down on Iran and North Korea, I think the only way that you can do that is by discounting your own government's willingness and ability to use its capabilities. And it's why in the past episode, I think it was the last episode, I kept yelling, like, don't put the Dutch down like that or anything. Because when you look at the Dutch and you look at the Israelis, what makes them so amazing is a combination of capability
And
and
willingness.
willingness and ability to use their powers. And in that sense, when you look at the North Koreans and the Iranians, we used to, uh, we had to pay attention to them all the time. But we used to say, they're really shitty at what they do, but God, are they willing to do it? Like they're willing to take on every dumb political fight, every little stunt. Like they'll, Sony Pictures Entertainment, right? Some dumb stoner comedy is enough for you to like go do like a landmark wiping incident. The problem now is, as Kostin has kept saying, the North Koreans have gotten really, really good at what they do. They're just mostly financially focused at it. And the Iranians are increasing in their capability. I think it's interesting to hear the observation that they may be, the ones reaching or climbing at the highest velocity. But I think to me, what has always been consistent is they're willing to use whatever the fuck they can get their hands on, and that's very interesting.
Willingness comes with like desperation too. Like more likely you'll see willingness happening in places where there's war and there's conflict and there's like real, like Austin says, the willingness of the North Koreans comes down to feeding your family, hunger, living, right? It's
Right.
like, um,
Probably the same in Iran nowadays. I mean, I know of people, they're like some of them good people who were working maybe 3 or 4 different jobs to be able to feed their families, simply because one job doesn't provide enough money for you to survive. So it's also very tough.
I
All
mean,
right.
keep in mind, right, the reason that that gas pump hack mattered so much is that no one in Iran, well, most people in Iran can't actually afford gasoline at standard prices. So, what the Predatory Sparrow folks took down was the state subsidized mechanism for being able to get gas so that you could, drive your cab and get to wherever you go. So, to your point, Kosin, right? Like there is a very different economic fabric that you're playing with here.
Can
Also,
we
looking at the prices of gas nowadays in Romania, I don't know if the US, we are there, my friends. We are also there. Could use some subsidizing.
can
Oh,
we can we pivot to the typhoon segment of our of our
the
esteemed podcast? We
can we
have
have a
news.
little like video intro? Like it's just like the more you know, it's a rainbow with
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, and the
FOMO
typhoon
typhoon.
comes
Just
spinning across. But we've delved into this at length on this show about the Wall Street Journal and public reporting on Salt Typhoon, and we've examined like where's the leaks coming from, who's responsible for this, why are we hearing about this now? There's no official information. This week we finally got a 3-paragraph statement from CISA, basically saying they're confirming an investigation into quote unquote a broad and significant cyber espionage campaign. They've confirmed that it has enabled the theft of customer call records data, compromise of private communications of a limited number of individuals, like we discussed last week, the 2 presidential campaigns, and the copying of certain information that was subject of U.S. law enforcement request, the FISA thing that we've discussed in the past. So they've basically looked at the 3 key things that have been publicly published, unsourced, and confirming. Is this just them under pressure from a lot of folks to say what's going on? Is CISA just saying, yeah, we know. Why do we get a 3-paragraph statement a month later?
well, it's at CISA speed. But look, I would have walked in here just to like make fun of it immediately because you go, yeah, what's the point of a 3 paragraph statement quite this late?
Hey, it's
What
official
is
confirmation. I mean,
exactly. You nailed it, right? Like that's the only thing that makes it interesting is so far we've had really good reporting and really bad reporting, but originally really good reporting from like Bob McMillan and folks were telling us, look, this thing happened, it's important, and it hit this like it's not just another APT at another Chinese APT at another telco, right? Like that's been happening forever.
can I stick a
It's
pin and ask an important question here? How does
sure.
Verizon and Lumen and these guys get away with just not even putting out a one-line statement? We're talking about official confirmation here. We're talking about vendors being transparent. We're talking about like this is a significant thing. I understand it's got national security implications, but I mean these are the culprits, right? The guys who've gotten
Well,
compromised.
this is a complicated one. So let me kind of piece this
Parse it for
apart.
me.
Just let me piece this apart a little bit, and while also admitting that I am not that familiar with SEC or FEC requirements for this kind of stuff, right? I'm not an expert at that. But what I will say is, um, I wouldn't lump all of these together, right? Like in the past, Lumen has always been an excellent uh, provider and like has leaned into providing information not just about this stuff, but about a bunch of the other activity related to this and their own original research. So shout out
Amazing
to the
work.
Black
Shout out to the
Lotus
Black
Labs.
Lotus Labs. You took the words out of my
Amazing
mouth.
stuff. I took yeah. But hey, like uh they've always done amazing work, and sometimes I wonder if just how much of the stuff we're seeing is actually just coming from them. So shout out to them. I don't want to paint them with the same brush. And frankly, like AT&T, owning, having bought Alien Vault, having like some good folks in there, they've put out research in the past. So it's not like they're an unwilling partner. Um, However, this is a dicey situation
I know.
and this is what we discussed the first time around with FOMO Typhoon is that you are the moment this is touching these like surveillance mechanisms that are this is some of like the gov crown jewels type shit. I don't think this is in their wheelhouse of getting to make decisions. Like
Correct.
this
I
is
agree with you.
genuinely more of like
I
a
mentioned that
government
national
problem.
security implications. This is probably one of those where SEC and some national security folks say, hey, we're going to bypass some of these reporting regulation, these notices and requirements on disclosure rules because this has national security implications. We've seen it in the past with previous cases. They actually
Right.
announced that. Costin, what do you make of us getting this official confirmation from CISA? And the CISA confirmation is only tied to the three things we know about, which means there's a lot. And the one thing you are allowed to laugh at, Juan, is this: FBI and CISA continue to render technical assistance, and get this line, rapidly share information to
Rapidly.
assist other potential victims,
Yes.
like,
Rapidly.
and sharing
Nicely
Excellent.
done.
information.
Rapidly
Um,
sharing. They're rapidly taking information from one person working on it and rapidly giving to someone else that was probably working on it, just in case they didn't write each other in the process of doing this work.
Speaking of sharing information, though, we actually did get was it a Trend Micro report on Salt Typhoon? We actually did get some sort of technical details. Costin, can you talk a little bit about this Earth S3's persistent
oh yeah.
Trend
So
Micro report?
I mean, as soon as I saw this CISA statement, I was thinking, on one hand, I was hoping there would be something with IOX. And then I saw this and I was thinking, okay, this was kind of expected in the sense a report with nothing new. Like, yes, broad and significant, we know that. Enable the theft of customer call records, we knew that. Limited number of individuals, we knew that. Copying of certain information that was subject to law enforcement requests. Now, this is interesting to me. To me, this is the only part which is interesting in the whole thingy, because what they are like hinting here is something that maybe Conspiracy Ryan was talking about like several episodes back. Um, so it means, at least the way I read it, is that some of the people were already under US law enforcement monitoring or interception. And what these people did, they just copied that data that was already being collected. That's how I read it. More in the lines of Operation Aurora back in the days. So it would be interesting to know if this is actually what we think it is and who they were kind of monitoring or intercepting or listening to. Hopefully not any of the politicians, so maybe those were like the additional targets. But like purely going to the technical side of things, I was kind of disappointed. There's nothing technical in there, no rapidly share information. There's
The truth
rapidly
is
or
that we
slow
don't know
nothing.
anything about Salt Typhoon, right? Other than it's got a name and it's infected some places
Not
on a
not
technical level.
not open, well, not openly, but there are people who know. I In this particular case, like, I appreciate CISA giving us confirmation of what we only knew about from reporting. Note that they didn't point to whatever this bullshit was with the iOS devices that we discussed last time, right? They
Mm,
didn't say, there's subsequent infections or whatever,
mhm.
for whatever that's worth. Um, Now, I also I think that I laugh at the rapidly sharing information aspect of it, in part because who the like a no, you're not really, but also what is this notion that like sharing information is an unalloyed good, right? Like that's always a good choice. Obviously, it's not always a good choice, and that's clearly what some folks have decided in the process of handling FOMO Typhoon. And however, to your mention earlier, right? Like there is this trend micro report on Earth S trees,
Mm.
and I went through it pretty
It
carefully.
is Salt
Mostly,
Typhoon.
well, I don't know what makes them say that it is Salt Typhoon and how reliable that is, because again, how do you compare some of that connective tissue when the connective tissue isn't necessarily public? Um, but also, there's so much room to mistake and clump some of this activity together in ways that may not be entirely accurate. that I'm just very hesitant. And I would be equally hesitant if this was a thing that like we were writing at labs or anywhere else, right? Like more in the sense of these Chinese operations now are so braided together and so messy and coming out of these shared orb networks and using shared tooling and relying on largely, sort of ephemeral tooling and all this kind of stuff and going through these bullshit appliances, that it's not that it's not Chinese, it's that telling the difference between Vault Typhoon and Salt Typhoon is a pretty tough task, as far as I know. And I for
And they're
all
two
these
separate
things,
things. They're two very, very separate things. As I understand it, Salt
yeah.
Typhoon, and we'll get into Volt Typhoon because the connective tissue here is that there's reporting in Bloomberg that Volt Typhoon completely compromised Singapore Telecommunications Network, which is Singapore's largest mobile carrier. Volt Typhoon is connected to it. And again, we're being told with this public reporting that this is to give China the ability to conduct disruptive attacks in the event of a military conflict. Now, that's completely different from cyber espionage, which SALT is. So we're kind of connecting these typhoons where the public reporting isn't quite clear on like the objectives of each. And it just seems like everything just gets mucked up into a ball of China bad, China bad.
All of it is a fucking mess. But in part, it's because we're having to come at this kind of backwards as a general audience. And in this particular case, I think we get lumped into general audience, right? If you're not in the middle of one of these investigations at an actual victim, with a good sense of what this, whatever working group, for lack of a better term, is doing with Vault or Salt, then it's just very hard to kind of know what version of activity you're looking at. And we've had similar instances in labs where like Alex Milenkowski or Tom Hagel have turned up really interesting Chinese activity, and you go, this looks like it could, in some way, fit under the umbrella of what may very well be Salt or Vault. But and it really comes down to, hey, we just so happen to know this really amazing person at MSRC, this really amazing person on working some of the stuff in Gov, this really amazing, or like some of our partners in some of the better collaboration centers, and we can work hand in hand with them and kind of get a sense of what's going on. But if you don't have access to that, if you're not actually kind of using this back channel way, what you can say is, I'm looking at a really interesting set of activity, and I believe that it is Chinese, and it may be connected to the same orb network that some of these other folks are using, but it gets very hard to go from there. So, like, no shade on the Earth Estuaries report. It's really interesting, and if it is Salt Typhoons very specifically, then it's the first sort of more detailed view we have at some of their tooling, some of the slightly more custom stuff. It also, whether it is Salt Typhoon or not, it's clearly exemplifying a worthy threat actor that is operating in the same way that we've been hearing about these guys. This sort of notion of engineering towards our blind spots, staying as ephemeral as possible, hitting these bullshit internet facing appliances, then moving through there. WMIC, using wget, using curl, abusing certain tools. Really interesting is some of the TTP stuff of like, they'll come in through Cobalt Strike, then use that to install a new tool, then go back and delete the previous tool, then reinstall the tool again later on. Like, they're just, to me, and this might sound kind of naive, but it's like, it's sort of like going back to the hands-on keyboard, like keyboard cowboy style of hacking that meant you were like very engaged, very careful, hands-on tradecraft. And maybe there's, surely there's some automation to it now, but I think you have to contrast that to the back in the day, to the industrialized model of cyber espionage that you get with organizations like NSA and some of the bigger SIGINT orgs, where you've mechanized the whole thing, and human beings are maybe at the beginning, or they're at the analysis end and they're at the development end, but the ops themselves are very mechanized in a way. It's like industrial era cyber espionage, whereas like these guys are, it feels artisanal in a way that seems to really pay off for them.
They're more
And
like,
this
if you want, like Moonlight Maze back in the days.
Right, right, right.
this Volt Typhoon Singtel thing is fascinating as well, because apparently Singtel has big telecommunications operations in Australia, which gives them insight into another Five Eye ally. And the Volt thing, someone badly wants us to believe that China has done all of this pre-positioning and set up inside these critical infrastructure networks, and when a war with Taiwan breaks out, they'll flip a switch and everything will go haywire. Like, that's the narrative being pushed. Is that believable, Costin? Like, when you read everything that you know about Volt, forget separate
Mm.
Salt from Volt. Volt, which is this war prepositioning campaign. Are you buying that narrative? Is it believable?
I I think it's these two are like two very big and sophisticated topics, and we haven't even mentioned Flex Typhoon, because Lumen was publishing about Raptor Train, Flex Typhoon, and again, you look at all these different things and you see them targeting ISPs, and kind of wonder, back in the days, maybe there was just, let's say, everybody knew that this actor is going after the ministries of foreign affairs, and this one is going after the satellite companies, and these guys are going after the ISPs. But it looks like nowadays it's the Wild West, and everyone is going after the ISPs. Suddenly they realize that there's a treasure trove of interesting data at ISP, so everyone's targeting them. If you ask me, I think that one thing that stands out from all these things is that everything happens at a kind of an accelerated pace nowadays. So things are happening faster and faster. Like today, they are hacking these kind of things. Let's say maybe these old appliances. Tomorrow, they go after the Exchange servers, because maybe there's some Exchange 0 day, and the day after, they're going after IIS or SharePoint. So things are changing so fast, and it will become more and more difficult in the future to tell them apart. Well, like, was it Volt Typhoon? Was it Salt Typhoon? Was it Flex Typhoon? Things are happening so fast, and they're like swapping exploits, sharing the same infrastructure, using the same malware, like these versions of WezRat, if you want, previously used by APT41. What I think is missing here would be maybe a good, thorough paper from Mandiant/Google. You know me, I'm a big fan of their attribution and their reports. I think that is missing. Or a good, thorough paper from Eastern
Sentinel
European
Labs, maybe?
vendors, Sentinel Labs, Checkpoint, ESET, if you want. I think it would be nice to have some good, thorough papers from these guys. Maybe not necessarily telling things apart, but going a bit deeper into what sets them apart, like what makes that this, and what makes the other thing different from that. Like, why is it Salt Typhoon targeting ISPs in the US, but in Singapore it's Volt Typhoon, not Salt Typhoon? Like, these kind of questions.
I actually don't love the distinction that Ryan, like it's not that you've made it, it's not your distinction, but you're bringing it up as far as like the Volt and Salt thing, where like Volt was considered so significant because it was treated as like prepositioning for wartime.
That's the
But
narrative that was pushed by the Microsoft and the US government when it was
I,
first.
well, I mean, I don't give a shit what Microsoft says on that front, because that's the same bullshit they were trying to push in Ukraine, and we know that that part, at least in the way that they did it in the beginning, was largely unsubstantiated. Right? It was someone at their bullshit, policy place saying, "Oh, this thing got attacked at the same time that it got bombed." Never mind that it
It's
was
not
being
only
bombed
Microsoft.
the
I mean, I've
entire
heard
fucking time.
I've heard government officials use this prepositioning thing. I mean, that's
No, no,
the
no, no.
official
Sorry.
narrative.
That's I understand. Like I that said, where I want to bring common sense back into it is we don't necessarily know all the specifics of what's going on in these ops, but we do know ops, and here's where I want to kind of bring the discussion about prepositioning into this very murky area, in the sense of, as far as a cyber operation component is concerned, what are you telling me is the prepositioning, right? Presumably, the most important part of it is they have entered, they have placed something, they have managed access to a place, that is strategically significant in its utility in in a given scenario or area, right? Like if I going back to Iran, if I'm interested in someday going to war with the Iranians, then putting a backdoor in their air defense systems is a form of enabling, prepositioning for the day that I want to bomb them. However,
Deterrence.
well, no, because that entails they know that it's there, right? Like, which means they can remove it, so it doesn't really work that way. But okay, it's the target is an important part of it. Are we talking prepositioning because I have enabled a form of access? Are we talking prepositioning because I have placed an implant that can control things that maybe means that they have access to changing things that matter as a potential? Or have I positioned a logic bomb that clearly has the only possible functionality and intent the way that InDestroyer worked or the way that Stuxnet worked, where the logic of this implant can only mean that my express development intention is to take down that air defense system? And there's three levels of at least three levels of what you may consider prepositioning in a strategic target. And the problem to me is the first two levels are indistinguishable from cyber espionage. So I'm not saying that we're not being told the truth. I'm not saying that we're being lied to. I'm saying that I expect that if it's true, if it's accurate, then what I expect is for there to be an all source or human tie-in that says that this cyber component is going hand in hand with a political intent to use this in this way. Unless you're telling me that you found a logic bomb, actual like piece of malware designed to disrupt or to cripple or to alter a
And they're not
critical
telling us
strategic
that.
system. Now, with that, we haven't been told that. We haven't seen that we
There's
haven't
no.
been told about that with Volt Typhoon, which does not mean it's not there. We just have not been told about
What do you personally believe? Do you personally believe the prepositioning narrative?
it.
I'm just trying to get a sense of like what should the audience be like, red flagging in their minds as they read all this stuff and see all the
I
tweets and whatever.
I think that we have a bad tendency as whenever we're on the outside looking in, we have a bad tendency to take our curiosity all the way
To
like
conspiracy.
past skepticism to conspiracy. And I would like us to traverse that path more slowly. Not because we may not end up there, right? Like maybe that is the truth. Sometimes people exaggerate, sometimes people get confused. But actually, I want us to linger longer in the space of curiosity because what I want to say is I don't know that Kostin, you may correct me here, and I hope that you can, but I don't know that we've ever seen the Chinese uh, do that kind of like full on hardwired, semi kinetic, or potentially kinetic style of cyber operation. And I'm not implying that they can't. I would be incredibly disappointed if they have not developed this sort of capability. But we've I don't know of an instance where we have heard or seen them deploying something like that. And that makes me very curious about how they view and classify that sort of operation in their mentality about cyber ops. Like, do they have a distinction where they go, oh, yeah, everything's allowed in cyber espionage, but if we were to do some semi kinetic shit, that would just be war? You go, okay. Like, these guys think about it in a way similar to how the US seems to maybe sometimes think about it. Um, or
That
what is
stuff
it?
is documented in their doctrine, whatever their doctrine is, right? I mean,
I'll ask Dakota. Dakota Carey would know perhaps, but but also I'm just curious, like everyone has a doctrine, like countries that have never in their lives figured out how to turn off a light switch with a PowerShell script would not, have a doctrine about cyberkinetic operations. It's very different when you talk about a country that has the capability somewhere in their own remit and has not deployed it.
Right. Just on the subject of slow walking or skepticism to conspiracy, I mean, a lot of that will be helped if people are a lot more transparent about stuff, and we're just not getting these droplets, and everything is overclassified, and samples are like state property, and the same things we've talked about at length. It's hard for us to I constantly have to ask the question: do I believe the narrative? Because we don't get evidence, we don't have success stories, we don't have this thing. I mean, Costin keeps reminding us. Just quickly on that question from Juan Costin, have we seen the Chinese involved in any sort of crossing to physical at all in the past?
So, I personally I don't buy into this prepositioning narrative, like you call it. I've seen this happen many times, and it happens a lot when technical people talk to politicians or military, and they try to describe something like, what are you seeing? Well, we are seeing them using implants to target a number of systems. What kind of systems? Well, it's electronic intelligence systems. So do you think that they're doing this on purpose? Yes, I think it's on purpose. Do you think they're doing it to learn about our capabilities? Yes. Could this be some kind of prepositioning to them invading us? Is that a possibility?
Questions become the report.
It is a possibility, right? So, so
Got it.
our story here is that they're preparing to attack us when they're actually no. Now, historically, I think we've seen prepositioning like the real kind. I've seen it twice in my career. The first time was before Russia invaded Crimea actually. And what I saw, and I remember I even wrote a report that Turla's infrastructure was booming. I mean, never before has anyone seen such a spike in the size of their infrastructure. They were like setting up tons and tons of new command and control center, and the question was why are they doing that? And then Russia invaded Crimea, and it made sense. Yeah, they were like trying to collect and put their eyes pretty much everywhere. So
and that was an obvious tell from people looking at it. Yeah,
I mean, it looked like. And then the downside, or like the other side of the story, happened before Russia invaded Ukraine. So what happened there was people were talking about it. Is Russia going to invade Ukraine? And I looked, and there was like no new Turla infrastructure. So I said, I don't think so, because there's no new Turla infrastructure. The last time they did this, there was tons of new. What I noticed, however, there was tons of new Gamma Redon infrastructure, like thousands and thousands of new domains. But the last time it wasn't Gamma Redon, it was Turla. So I said, like, there's no chance they're invading because there's no new Turla infrastructure. Then I realized, so it wasn't Turla, it was Gamma Redon this time. So at least we know that in case of Russia, their typical prepositioning before invasions or big things is these huge spikes between 3 to 4 months before the actual invasion takes place. So maybe it takes time for the orders to be passed left and right. So we know that's how it works with Russia. With China, I think we don't know how it really looks like. Is it more infrastructure, more implants?
Is it possible the people who have actual eyes on it know that it's prepositioning, know that it is this Turla expanding, this Gamma Redon expanding? Is it possible at all that they are actually seeing signs of what you saw in their own telemetry, whatever they have?
It could be. It could be that they are seeing and saying like, this looks like Turla back in the days and Gamma Redon back in the days. But to be honest, if they were confident that was the case, there would be maybe more direct messaging, like, you better not invade us, like, because we are like super ready. Like, so I think it would be more direct. And again, the only kind of prepositioning that would make sense at the moment would be related to Taiwan, right? I think that's where things could
Well, that's
potentially
where they
get
see it,
hot.
right?
That's
Like
exactly what
that's
they're
what they're
saying. Yeah.
discussing, right? Like Guam
Mhm.
would be a strategic like point for U.S. military in the case of any kind of hostilities in South China Sea, etc. Look, one way that we could read this, even in the case of not seeing explicit tooling for X, Y, and Z, is just how hard did they work to try to get to a very specific niche portion of a specific target. Like that's a different way to go at it, right? Like if you tell me that there's a in Guam, there's one power company, and they like anyone might Abney APT might end up in the power company, right? Why wouldn't you? But we actually watched that they got into the power company and they mapped out the place and they made sure to only put their tools in the one Windows XP machine that could take down the power to a military base, right? Like sure, there's ways that you could kind of foresee that. I also, Kostin, I would say interesting. No Violet, no Violet Lamberts, but there's there is a sort of interesting mentality that comes to this notion of determining intent behind cyber operations, and I think a
Hold on
lot
a
of the
second.
time
Hold on a second. You can't just drop a code name between you and Costin, and I am not going
we
to be
can have our
sitting
little
here.
jokes, we can have our moments,
I'm
right?
not going
Like
to be sitting here and asking you what is this Violet Lambert or what's the connection. Quickly, I'll
no
make a
idea.
note that Bloomberg is reporting that the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that his nation has no interest in interfering in other people's internal affairs through cyberspace. So we have official word from
Oh,
the Chinese
good.
government. They also said that they oppose the spreading of China-related disinformation due to people's political agendas. So
Yeah.
much for hearing of that stuff. Now, I want to pivot because this is going to be the China episode. Just, Juanito has constantly told us that China is kicking our asses. We have, this week was Patch Tuesday. And coming out of Patch Tuesday, Microsoft Patch 2.0 days is becoming a monthly thing. ODay is exploited in the wild. Clear Sky, which is a research company that was credited with one of them, CVE 2024-4351, said that one of them was actually Russia hitting Ukraine. So that's part of the other thing. But what stood out in the Patch Tuesday reporting for me is some very interesting bugs reported by some very interesting Chinese folks. And shout out to the people at cnnic.cn, 4 folks responsible for reporting this 2024-43450 DNS spoofing bug. I mean, if you know about DNS spoofing, if your country is the master at it, like this is where it comes from. And then the Cyber Kunlun, which we've discussed on this episode in the past, reporting some pretty nasty RCEs. Shout out to the Chinese folks reporting bugs to us. China is kicking our asses and at the same time helping us protect our software. Juanito, how do you explain that?
They feel sorry for us. They go, God, help yourself. You guys are a fucking mess. Here,
The,
let
the
me
hidden
let me
part of
give
all
you a
of
couple.
this, the hidden part of all of this that everyone knows is that the Chinese government had access to these for a long time prior to it getting actually reported and fixed through their new laws and so on. Is there any?
I, I don't know, man. Like, first of all, yes, shout out to them for reporting the bugs, and it's awesome. And it could not have been easy. Like that takes some kind of process. What the intent there is, I don't know. But regardless, like you're helping to raise the security for everybody. So credit to these folks. Um, I actually don't like. I know the narrative here, and it's not just a narrative, right? Like the legal reality is such in that world where the Chinese government has access to all these vulnerabilities early. However, I do still think that I prefer a smoking gun in the sense of show me that it was used in a cyber operation in this and that way so that we can have a more mature conversation about that VEP process. Because that's, to be fair, that was the same kind of uh, just general suspicious air that people tried when they discussed like any kind of vulnerabilities equities process with the US government as well. It was like, well, you're just handing them bugs. You go, unless you see them using them in some way, um, right? Like there's many hands within that gov. I'm not trying to be naive about the Chinese. I am pointing out that it was Patrick Howard O'Neill's reporting about the use of O-days from Chinese CTF competitions, the O-day competitions that were being used in like operations against Uyghurs, where you finally go, hold up, right? Like, if you wanted to tell me that this is the most principled part of the Chinese government, right? Like they take O-days and never would they ever misuse them. Okay, well, here we have an example of this being misused. So, like, the reason I'm making this distinction is not to be soft on China, but rather that I don't see the Chinese suffering for O-days, right? Like, they are in the position that the U.S. was or has always been, where like the U.S. could afford to have a VEP process because they could sit there and go, of all the millions of amazing 0 days and all this great exploitation shit I have in my hands, like maybe this one's a little unfair. Why don't you go fix that part, right? And like you're not depleting the stockpile, quote unquote. You are having a conversation about the health of the ecosystem. And that's where things like um, Eternal Blue, I think, must have advanced certain conversations inside of the building where you go, guys, yeah, we are able to use this carefully, and have because none of us ever saw the NSA using Eternal Blue in the wild, uh, because the thing never exploded to replicating across the entire internet. Surely because of the checks and the ways that it was implemented. And then the minute you give it to some other fucking kid, like, oh, there you go. Like the whole internet has been taken down with WannaCry. So that must have influenced that conversation. In the Chinese side of the house, I'm wondering, like, what is their equities process wherein they go, this shit needs fixing. And
This is one of those though. Like I feel like
right,
this bug, this
right.
Windows DNS spoofing bug, is one of those. Like, why would they give this up?
Well,
That came. The first thing came to mind is like, why would the Chinese give up a bug, a machine in the middle bug that they can inject themselves into and listen to conversations and manipulate
I'll
traffic?
I'll give you two things to consider. One of them is, was it used against them? The second one is, at the end of the day, the Chinese, to whatever capacity they rely on Windows, are not in a place to fix Windows just for themselves. Whenever you do want to, you know, actually improve the security of the thing that you rely on, and it's the same thing everybody else relies on, like there's a reason you don't poison the well that both armies drink from, right? Like you need to at some point um, admit that if the only way to secure yourself is also to secure your enemy, you're still better off securing both, right?
What do you think, Austin? What do you think of the Chinese reporting this bug? What do you think? And in fairness, despite the law and despite all our concerns about China having advanced access to bugs, the Chinese researchers are still the top of the list of people reporting it to MSRC. They're still featured prominently in Apple advisories and bulletins being credited. So they're still actively reporting a lot of vulnerabilities to us all through ZDI, Pontuon, all these contests. You still see Chinese folks appearing. Costin, what do you make of? Is this conspiracy, Ryan, speeding down the road here?
I think so. I would say that the Chinese government most likely has some kind of policy
Overflow?
defined. No, but the policy defined already, and the policy may say, all right, based on our experience, we've seen and we know that the moment we start deploying a 0 day, it takes the NSA maybe 3 weeks or 3 months to catch our 0 day, and then they start using it against us, and the damage is probably much higher than from the NSA using it against us than the benefit from us using it against them. So that means that we need to have some kind of a policy. We use something for a while and then we patch it. So I'm confident they do have this kind of a policy where they limit the uses of 0 days for a period of time to make sure that it doesn't get captured and used back against them. Now, I would assume that they have maybe different policies for different types of bugs. So maybe Things like in Windows, escalation of privilege is not as bad as remote code execution, so you can hold on to the EOP for longer if you want. Then RCEs like direct network RCEs are the most dangerous ones. So I would assume they have a policy, and what we are seeing here is that whenever the expiration date hits on the 0 day, then it gets reported and patched because it turns into some kind of a race. For how longer can we still use this 0 day before someone else uses it on us?
Is it good strategy to look through bulletins for reporting from certain people and make sure you prioritize patching that one specifically because of what you just said? It's already been used. It's already it's something like this. You should be on top of your wheels to get this patch, right?
I think you should patch everything as soon as it becomes available. For sure, there's something which are more worrying, like 0 days in these magic walls.
Let's get to it.
You're calling Bitcoin magic money, so I'm gonna call these firewall appliances. I'm gonna call them magic walls. So
magic walls. In our magic wall reporting segment. In our Magic Wall reporting segment, we have Palo Alto confirming today that an unauthenticated remote command execution vulnerability is being exploited in the wild against a limited number of firewall management interfaces that are exposed to the internet. They put out a CVSS 9.3 advisory. No CVEs, no CVE attached to this one. It's been added to the CISA Kev list last night. It's all kind of like live as we speak now. This is another one. It's Fortinet, Ivanti, Palo Alto. Palo Alto is a security vendor of repute with a great threat intelligence team. What do we make of this kind of hodgepodge confirmation of O'Day without any sort of details? Doesn't even have a CVE. You're saying, hey, there's a bug being exploited, disconnect things from the internet, but there's no CVE. It's like, Is
there a patch?
There is no patch either.
No patch, no IOPS, no information, just this.
It's being
something.
popped. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something, right? If you're a customer and there's no, for whatever reason, there's no patch yet, are you happier being told to start looking for configuration changes and we're working on something that's going to help you? Or do you prefer they stay quiet while you get, potentially fucked and then they go, oh, yeah, you've been getting fucked for 2 weeks, but here's a patch. We were waiting to have a patch, right? And I'm not trying to be soft.
It's your software.
I'm not trying to be soft on Palo Alto. I'm just saying,
you are.
Well, I'm trying to be reasonable here in the sense of I would like to give the benefit of the doubt to the companies that have been putting more effort into being responsible players. That's it.
And they are.
Right. And that's what I want to teach to companies like Fortinet, where I'm like, it's not that we like jumping up and down on you. It's just that we're so unimpressed with your lack of trying that no, we're not in your camp, and no, we're not all, vying for your well-being. We would be happier for you to be replaced by somebody that's more responsible. But that also means that when somebody who is acting responsibly is maybe stumbling or having a hard time or trying to figure their shit out, I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if Palo Alto fucks up, then they fuck up, right?
I won't. Especially in the case of O'Day reporting. You can't tell me that this thing is on fire. Someone is popping a limited number of things and, hey guys, sorry, there's nothing you can do right now, and not even a shred of information to help me go look for hunting. You just basically say, look for suspicious threat activity, unrecognized configurations changes, look and see if anyone added a user. It's like, dude, this is unacceptable reporting.
Yeah. No, I'll give you that.
Costin, who is this? Is this China?
Oh dear. Depends. I mean, if we knew where are those limited number of devices, where are they?
Just tell us something, anything.
That would be
anything.
Like quite
it's
interesting.
happening it's happening in Cambodia.
Are they in Ukraine?
Just tell me something.
Are they in Guam? Like if they're in Guam, it's big shit, right? But I understand why Palo Alto says we don't have sufficient information. That's the reality. So two things here. One, enhanced telemetry. I think more people need to build better, heavier enhanced telemetry in their network appliances specifically. not EDR, not free antivirus, whatever, but network devices, I think, particularly suffer from the lack of the same level of telemetry that we have on desktops. That's
Man,
the first thing. I know what you're gonna say, but like this, that's the reality. There's not enough talent. And the two, I think that all the big vendors, if they don't have that already, like the Magic Wall people, should have huge pools of honeypots deployed on the internet in all parts of the internet with the biggest, most badass telemetry that you can imagine, waiting for them to get popped with 0 days, and whenever that happens, to set off alarms, and so that they can immediately investigate it. So if they don't have that, I think that everyone should have thousands, tens of thousands of honeypots, um, real looking devices on the internet with the latest patches, and then hunting for 0 days, hitting them.
Real looking, bro. Like they have the devices, right? Like what a wonderful situation to be in, right? At least like you can't do that with iPhones because no one's shooting iOS O days indiscriminately, but you can do it with these dumbass appliances, right? Like anywhere they're on the internet, if you put a remotely official sounding name on that thing, like someone's gonna hit it. So I actually haven't given that a whole lot of thought, Kosta, and it makes me even more disappointed in some of the appliance vendors, right? Because
isn't this what
we know,
Harun's company does? That they can create tokens that resemble these things?
I mean, I don't think in this, like specifically for this use case, but it is the same mentality, right? Like if you're just setting tripwires, which is a mentality that was actually quite popular in like the Unix and Linux development side of the house like 20 years ago, and I thought it was fucking great. Like I actually wish that I think that mentality got kind of bastardized when people started to talk about like deception type solutions, which I just think were overcomplicated. Like you were talking about, like, can I create an entire fake network that looks like our network but has fake data in it, and we put them in there, and then we watch them. We're like, guys, you went too far. How about you just put a couple of user accounts that are slightly unprotected and nobody actually uses them? And if somebody like tries to use them at some point, you just fucking start raising like red lights and alarms inside of the SOC because there's no legitimate use for that account, right? Like it's simpler, but it's more along the lines of like, hey, someone's traipsing across our network. They don't know it as well as we do. They just tried to use something that looks legitimate and isn't. Here we go. To Kostin's point, these motherfuckers are sitting on hundreds of these appliances that they just have around. They could have a dev version of it. They could have like a debugging net version of it. They could have it, hardware connected to something else, and just sit there and wait for the O days to come. And clearly, they're not doing that because all the O days are getting reported to them by third parties.
By China.
Isn't it amazing to you that every week there's a firewall all day live fire drill happening, and we've just
No.
accepted as this is the norm? Like this
No,
is madness.
It's not amazing to me because what we should be saying is, isn't it amazing to you that people are paying for appliances whose software is clearly garbage?
Why? Why are they paying? Let's the crux of the
Dude,
issue is that we talked about this at length. They
we've
have no
talked about
alternative. They
this.
need this VPN access. They
Yeah.
need this kind of like fake network security thing that they believe they're getting. What is
Yeah.
I mean, other than hacking things together, like what are people supposed to do if this is a weekly occurrence and we just sit back and accept?
It's just that, like, look, everybody who's affected, even potentially affected, needs to be exerting pressure. This is one of those areas where I will point the finger to CISA for as long as it still exists and say CISA has really failed all of us because they gave these motherfuckers a pass and a gold star and a pat on the back, and without getting anything from them, without
What do you
getting
mean with the pledge?
with the pledge, and like, oh, it's okay, Avanti and everybody else is just, they're all our buddies now, and they said they would do better. We're not going to check. We don't have any metrics. There's no milestones. There's no actual, any kind of progress that's measurable or anything. Like you just, like, you pissed in my pocket and told me it's raining, and that's good enough. And frankly, it upsets me because that was one of the main sources of pressure where it should have come from. And that obviously failed. So now, at best, I would love to see, all the things we've discussed before, right? Like maybe the FCC comes in, maybe you get someone who finally figures out that maybe FedRAMP should actually be used on a recurring evaluation basis and not just be a check mark for the rest of your fucking life as a company. But more than anything, that's the vendor side. On the customer side, yes, they need to put pressure, but I don't come down on customers quite so hard when it comes to enterprise needing to play the purchase through compliance mechanism, right? If you're a CISO, the idea is you have 7 checkboxes. Which solutions check the 7 checkboxes? And
Ivanti is on the list. We have Ivanti. We get the box. Yeah.
and there's 5 more. There's 2 better products, but that only check 5 checkboxes because they haven't gone through the whole certification process for SOC 2. Oh, I'm gonna put my job on the line to go with this thing. No, we're gonna go with Ivanti. So I don't agree with it, but I don't fully put the pressure on them. I just think someone's got to start to package this stuff up differently. Somebody's got to provide us with a different software that can be installed on existing appliances. We need to just come up with some way that just cuts these motherfuckers out and probably generates an entire ecosystem of new companies and business that can make a fuck ton of money. Just use this is one of those places where I want the free market to the exceedingly free market to somehow bite them in the ass.
At the risk of making this an inordinately long episode, it's not too early to ask what happens next with CISA. I mean, it's the top conversation today. We've had Rand Paul make public statements about, hey, I wouldn't mind getting rid of this thing altogether. In reality, you're probably not going to be able to get rid of it altogether, but CISA, as we know it, is about to undergo. I mean, there is no doubt in your mind, Juan, that we're going to see an entirely different organization with a different mission and a different ask, right? What is your initial thought about what happens?
I think there's so first of all, and I this caveat I may have to repeat for the next 4 years. I don't like getting really hung up on predictions about this kind of administration, because I think it's an administration that is chaotic, unprincipled, opportunistic, and incompetent. So none of those are the bases for good prediction. So, and people say, "Oh, believe them when they tell you what they're going to do." I believe them when they tell me what they intend to do. Does that mean they know how to do it? Does that mean they do it effectively? Does that mean that, halfway through the process, Elon Musk doesn't run into the room and go, "Wait, I've got a much better idea," and they just swerve, because that's what they do. They're unprincipled. They don't have an actual strategy. So if someone has a better idea, that shit might change overnight. So
And even if you're on the other side of the political aisle and you think that these people are disruptive, it's hard to accept the acceptance of norms. It's very difficult to expect an approach to norms, because there are no norms anymore.
There are no norms, right? It's all unwritten, for better and worse. In this case, almost certainly for the worse. Now, when it comes to CISA in particular, I'm sure that they must have been feeling this impending sense of change, not necessarily doom, regardless of what was going to happen with who won, because you're almost certainly going to change directors. Not a knock on Jen in any way, but it just happens with most administrations. You're unlikely to get a tenure longer than. Maybe if they think you're doing a great job, they'll keep you there. But if you're doing a really great job, maybe they'll give you a better job or a different position, right? So there's always an expectation of change when it comes to the political appointees. And then you have the feckless bureaucrats and the careerists, and then some good people that have no intention of moving. In this particular case, I have no idea what to expect. I mean, Rand Paul's accusations aren't even based in any kind of reality. Let's start there. So really, you're coming at it as we just don't fucking like this boogeyman we've created. And they're going to have to come defend these meetings. And people are those meetings didn't really happen. It's you better get ready to defend them. And okay, bro. This is just, they could try to fucking tear this shit to the ground tomorrow. I don't know how that works. I don't think in my lifetime, I don't remember ever seeing the government shrink much less, somebody just try to remove any of this stuff. And it's hilarious that
Is it fair that they've overstepped their original remit? Because I remember a previous episode of the conversation where you might have even suggested that they were like bordering into different directions, and I feel like this is the knock that the folks have against CISA is that, hey, you provide a significant value, but at the same time, someone just said on this podcast, CISA has completely failed us. Like there's
no,
nuance to the value of CISA and the money
I
spent and what we got out of it and all of that.
look, I get what you're saying, and I'm not objecting to it. I just want to treat it um, with some nuance, since it's not going to get any nuance in the near future. Um, I don't think that the bullshit these people are talking about as censorship was censorship. And I don't even think that they were overstepping their remit. The problem with CISA has never been that they overstepped their remit. The problem with CISA has been that they've been trying to grow their remit to expand beyond the scope of literally anybody else at the table. They want their remit to be everything cyber all the time, which is why they've never been successful in any part of their remit, because there's no way that you can like hug the world that way. If this were just if they were just the cyber and election security agency, you have a much smaller set of priorities, and you can set some goals and metrics and say, look, year over year, we have somehow positively affected this. When you want to be the cybersecurity and infrastructure and elections and the Twitters and, funny campaigns for MFA and making songs and performing live on stage and going wherever, like when you want to be fucking everything, you're never going to succeed.
But this
So
is what Ron Paul is saying, isn't it?
no, no, no. He's saying they exceeded their
Well, yeah,
remit.
I
He's
understand the
saying,
political side of it.
well, I
But
mean,
he's saying it needs fixing. The thing needs fixing.
but he's not talking about fixing it. He's not talking about fixing it. He's talking about tearing it down as a boogeyman and being able to take a bunch of like former administration people and parade them in front of Congress for 3 weeks for a news cycle, and then they'll forget about it and they're gonna go jump up and down on someone else. Like,
Somebody still got to do incident response on the federal government. Somebody still got to maintain this KEV list that is now become a default in all our
yeah.
tools. Like you can't get rid of CISA. So let me put the
Man,
question
it
to you.
would have been great if we hadn't gotten rid of, let's say, US CERT and some of these other organizations that might have had overlapping remits with CISA and then got swallowed for no fucking reason whatsoever. Like maybe
So,
if we
n-
had some redundancy in this
so there's a
government, and
lot to fix, right? Now we're getting to the
bro,
crux of
no,
it.
stop it, because like in this like with
Okay,
other
forget the
topics,
administration, Juan. I
with
give you the
other
magic wand. Forget Rand
no,
Paul. Forget the chaos that's coming. All of that. Let's try to have an intellectual conversation. That one, it's fucking broken. Two,
yeah,
there's a lot of little things that need fixing. And let me put
yeah,
it to you: what would you have? CISA? Would you just revert back to US CERT and get rid of CISA
no,
altogether and put the powers there? Like, how would you approach
no. My,
realistically?
I think if we wanted to succeed, and you're telling me that it's magic wand moment, then I wouldn't bother with doing anything to CISA right now. The problem that we're seeing is a lack of redundancy and a lack of specificity. I don't want the omnibus mega mall cybersecurity agency. I want US CERT to do a thing well. I want CISA to try to do a thing well. I want the NSA to spin out CSD in the way that GCHQ did NCSC, but to actually make some significant policy changes around what those people are meant to do, how classification is going to get slightly unfucked on the way there, and what remit these people actively have to do, because they will take it seriously if you tell them that it is their responsibility to do it. Then I want you to go and empower, UNAD under advisement under CNMF and make them bigger and broader. I want you to tell the CIA to come fucking sit at the table and find some way to talk to other human beings and figure out how to, do things over here. And I want you to create a couple more organizations. Like, look, we burn money in this country. Well, in that country, I'm in Argentina right now. We burn money in that country left and
Are you
right for
not
all
coming
kinds of
back?
frivolous bullshit. I don't know, man. There's an aviation strike, and frankly, things have been pretty nice out here.
The
So
steak
I
is
don't know.
good too.
The steak is good. People are nice to me here.
Didn't
So
didn't Argentina have like a big efficiency ops like some time ago? That's
yeah,
coming
It's a
in the
big
I
massive
US.
don't.
money country as well.
Well, it was. I don't know how much it will continue to be. The inflation stuff has changed and whatnot. But I'm not competent about what's happening in this government, so I'm just going to shut my mouth.
Costin, you have a thought on what happens to the CISA moving forward, or this is just like y'all, you Americans over there and your drama?
I mean, everybody loves drama. I mean, if you look on X these days, and by the way, there's a lot of people that started following me on Blue Sky. I think you Ryan also created an account on Blue Sky.
Yeah, you
Juan has
bullied
been
me. I
there.
got cyber
I
bullied into
bullied you.
creating an account.
All the cool kids are on Blue Sky now.
We're on Blue Sky. You can find us on Blue Sky. Mastodon. Like, to be honest, I was never a
No,
big fan of that.
I don't like Mastodon.
Yeah,
Can we get back to CISA quickly?
but
I want to close
back
this
very
episode.
very quickly back to CISA. I would say, like, again, my point was, from what I am reading, not on Blue Sky, on X, basically, because that's where the big action happens at the
X is
moment.
where you get official government news.
That's where you get the government news. The way I read it is that this Dodge, the Department of Government Efficiency, will be coming after CISA. I mean, there's no way they're gonna let CISA alone. So there'll probably be some cuts, like you said, a new leadership. Me personally, what I would love to see is that maybe they do better, more technical reports in the future. Again, I'm all about IOX. Like, politics, I don't care about politics. Please, if there's gonna be some kind of
Fix your
restructuring,
Yara
whatever,
rules.
better Yara rules, please. More
M-
IOX, less
Make Yara
TTPs.
great again.
Make
So,
Yara
like,
great again.
No, no. Look, so one thing I will say is, there's a reason I talked about like fecklessness and inefficiency and whatnot. There is in this administration of pure chaos, there is what these fucking squirrels are obsessed with right now. There's what they're able to somehow manage to cobble together, and then there's what happens. Like the reason this is all chaos is today they will say that they're going to destroy CISA. Tomorrow they will have hearings and parade them halfway through. The next day they'll say that the CISA is going to end completely. Then they'll put someone they like as the head of CISA. Then, when they were ready to destroy it, they figured out that it's just a little more complicated than they realized. And the next day something big happens on TV and they forget. So, like, it's not that I'm saying that nothing is going to happen. I'm just saying that there's a huge gap between where these people want to go and how effective they are at getting there. And chances are we're going to end up with just some like zombie carved out CISA that has like half the budget, and some shitty person off of like Fox News is running it because they know how to send emails real good. And then, like, that's how you end up with like a CISA that just doesn't do anything more
Two
than
direct questions for
currently
you.
does do
Two
anything.
direct questions for you, and I know I'm asking you to speculate and predict, but does the CSRB survive, the Cyber Safety Review Board? I mean, with a pro company, a pro business administration in place, the CSRB actually ruffles a lot of feathers, caused Microsoft to go spend a ton of money on this SFI. Does that survive, you think?
I don't know which. Look, man, everybody who's still in some version of some portion of the government that ever did anything valuable and thinks that they've ever added some value to society, the true test of your legacy is, what do you do with the remaining time you have? That notion of like a lame duck session is some of that like bullshit gentleman's agreement type, dual nonsense where like we go to war with muskets and stand in a straight line staring at each other and take a break for lunch. Like, that is bullshit. You have however many months left. What the fuck are you going to do? Why hasn't the CSRB done anything on the appliances? Why hasn't the CSRB sat back down and said, look, we at least have a couple of months, we're gonna fucking knock out as many of these things as possible. That's one approach. If you're telling me your mission matters, okay, it should matter beyond the longevity of your employment or beyond the longevity of your stardom. Like, I say that because I see Nicole Perlroth on Blue Sky, like, crying about what happens if CISA leaves. Like, well, you'll have to find a different title to put on when you go on MSNBC. But like, I don't know that in any way actually affects anyone. The CSRB was setting precedent for things that I think were important and we wanted to see more of. And there's no one stopping you from publishing shit until the day they pry you off of that seat. So fucking go get some stuff done and we'll figure out what happens with the future of the CSRB in the future.
So you don't think in the future it survives? They should scramble and get whatever they could get out now.
No one should assume that anything they were doing is gonna remain the same.
Does the pledge survive? The pledge is a carrot and stick kind of. I'll get you and see. I'll get you to take a picture with Jenny Easterly at RSA, and you'll get that. But on the back end, you have to give me these things, and you have to add MFA, and you have to add some transparency. It's a nice idea. I mean,
were they actually adding things?
I had a long chat with your buddy. I had a long chat with Jason Kichter this week around the same issue, and he is saying, as a CISO, I signed the pledge from Automox, and I hope it doesn't go away, because I asked him the same question, and he's saying, listen, the pledge has put a lot of pressure on me. It's coming up in sales conversations. It's coming up in customer conversations. It's pushing me to do a lot of things. And it's also getting me a lot of support from my board of directors because now it's a real thing in a conversation. So as much as we might dismiss the pledge as a purity thing, there's a real issue on the back end that's happening. Does that survive, do you think?
I don't know what happens from this point forward. I mean, look, PR is relatively free. There's nothing keeping people from signing pledges and making press releases and doing that kind of bullshit. The thing with CISA that I've never enjoyed is how personality driven it is, right? Like the thing that has always bothered me, and there's so many, but like the thing that has always really bothered me about how CISA does things is that the initiatives live for as long as the enthusiasm of the announcement lasts. Like you don't look at the story of CISA and go, well, in its first year, they created this thing. That is still alive and kicking. Then in their second year, they did this, and that has now transformed into this greater thing. And then the fourth year, like that's what legacy is, and that's what it means when you create structures that do things. And when you don't, when you just like announce things because you're going on stage and you need something to announce, and by the next time you go on stage, you forgot the last thing you announced, and now you're announcing a new thing, then there's really nothing to count on for the future because we haven't seen structural things. We haven't seen actual initiatives that last any longer than whatever a given human being's attention span is. So I don't know what to expect. We may very well just get complete silence because everybody decides that they're unassigned. They're going to sit on the roof until like the day that somebody escorts them out of the building.
The more you talk, the more you convince me that the thing is completely broken and needs to be discarded.
It is completely broken. There's a difference between a solution. There's a difference between a solution and just shutting some shit down to score some cheap political points. Like shutting CISA down tomorrow doesn't make our situation better. Keeping CISA around doesn't make our situation better. So like, let's figure out what would be meaningful, and then let's admit that nothing meaningful is on the table at all. No one is discussing any solutions. The great genius, unofficial vice president Elon Musk is not showing up here telling us his grand plan for securing jack shit. You're just cutting stuff. Okay, fine. Small government. Yeah, whatever. Cool, man.
You can't have it both ways. Both sides of the political aisle, both sides of the aisle agree that CISA is shit. Like at some point,
I'm just saying that you're not proposing a solution. You're just proposing to parade some people in front of a TV camera. It's a FERP walk.
Fair enough. Bitcoin has hit an all-time high. The North Korean government just had their GDP improved by XYZ. Kostyan. Kostyan, you're our correspondent. I know we make fun and call it magic money, but cryptocurrency world and the intersection with security and all the implications is really top of mind right now. I want to do two things Is there any fresh news in the magic money world that you're following? One, and two, a question that came up on the last episode with the Meat Space, the guy who had gotten kidnapped, and the Meat Space episode. Like, what's the mitigation for that? How do I? Is there any sort of framework / technology / approach / whatever you call it to mitigate the risk of what happened to that guy? Help me understand how you think about it.
So there's for sure multiple solutions. Remember, even the one that I mentioned, that people store, like, let's say the vast majority of their magic money, they store the seeds on metal tablets. They bury in 3 different places, and even, let's say, if you get beaten, like, to disclose the locations, maybe one of them is in Germany, one of them is in Sweden, one of them is in the US. It still takes time to travel to all these different locations and reassemble like the different parts of the cures to restore the magic money. So one of them is, like, obviously don't carry all your magic money with you. But at the same time, in this case, I don't know if it was really possible to mitigate it, because they kidnapped the CEO of a magic money organization, and then the organization, paid for him, basically. So they still have to have. So I would say there's different cases. If you're, like, maybe a wealthy magic money type, then don't keep all your magic money with you, and put some of them in cold storage in different countries, in different places. A lot of people like this multi-signature wallets, multi-sig wallets, which require, again, multiple things, which are not maybe necessarily all of them stored in one place. The old school advice: don't put all your eggs into one basket, if you want.
If only these people knew how to shut the fuck up about their money, then maybe they
Oh yeah,
wouldn't have any of these
absolutely.
problems, right? Like, if you'd stop telling people that you have a bajillion dollars
Magic
Putting
money.
that
of,
Bitcoin icon on your Twitter feed, right?
yeah,
It's
exactly.
like-
Like, why do you? It's like everyone's pumping their shit up by telling other people how much money they have sitting around to get stolen.
yeah, we don't talk about Bitcoin ownership. Costin, any other news happening in your world? And Juan, more importantly, like, Bitcoin is USA is going to be the Bitcoin capital of the world. There's been multiple public utterances. When the people tell you what they're going to do, believe them, etc., etc. Does this make you and your team pay more close attention to the kind of criminal activity that's populating that space? You expect more moving forward? Money, the magic money valuations are crazy.
I mean, the magic money valuations are crazy, which in part incentivizes some level of greater value and ownership, sure. But I'll give you a different side to this, and this is something we used to discuss with when Bitcoin was like in the 30-some thousand dollars. It's expensive to pay a fucking ransomware fee in a currency that has suddenly fluctuated to near 6 figures, right? Like, is it actually, it's appealing for the people that are holding on to the currency. How convenient is it for the people who need to fucking pay a $7 million ransom that the next week is actually now a $12 million ransom, just by virtue of the fact that you need to buy Bitcoin, right? And it's just to say that, like, what we're seeing is greater value being assigned to this bullshit thing that makes money launderers happy. And
Costin, why is he
hopefully,
dismissing it as a bullshit thing?
That I don't know. I mean,
wow.
you keep calling me the magic money
Correspondent.
buddy,
Buddy.
when in reality I'm not. Actually, I was thinking that, I mean, among my friends, there's people who know a lot more. Like, for instance, our good old friend Tanase. He knows a lot more about magic money than me. He has his own magic money and so on, which I can only dream
Don't
of.
tell people. They're gonna kill him.
They're gonna not
They're
necessarily,
gonna
but
kidnap Tanase.
they're gonna invest in his magic money.
Okay. You see the
But
problem here?
what I was thinking is that there's this fear of missing out. People are like, I didn't buy when it was 30, I didn't buy when it was 60, and so on and so on. I just wanted to say one thing, and you keep mentioning Elon Musk. Remember that Elon Musk he bought bitcoins when the bitcoins were 30,000. Then the Bitcoin collapsed, like all the way down to 11 or so. Then he
Genius.
started kind of selling some of it, and eventually
Genius.
he sold everything when it went back to 30. I'm just saying that the smartest, richest person on the planet missed out and sold all his bitcoins at 30,000. So you're not
Paper
alone.
hands. Paper
We are
hands,
not
man.
alone. It happens to the best of us.
It's almost like the whole thing is just a fucking gambling Ponzi scheme that, like,
Well, you could say that everything is a Ponzi scheme. The stock market, that's a Ponzi scheme, right? The US dollar, that's a Ponzi scheme.
it
Everything in this world is a
Can we
Ponzi
just
scheme.
stick to
not
VC being the
everything.
Ponzi scheme?
No,
VCs,
like
Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi scheme. Well, yeah, VCs are a Ponzi scheme, but as
What,
Chamath
what
Palpatia would explain. But
the US elections, like with this lobbying, like the lobbying Ponzi scheme.
Quickly. The Pennsylvania lawmakers have introduced legislation in their state house to permit its treasury to hold up to 10% in Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Rainy day fund, blah, 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 blah. Pretty significant costing because this creates also another target for the North Koreans, don't you think? I mean, the question I just threw to Juan was, do you expect a ramp up in crypto-related things happening and crime and the kind of things that you're tracking, like all this fancy wallet compromises and so on? What do you expect to happen in the next year or so as we navigate these crypto waters?
That was a question to Juan or to me?
You.
To me.
You're the one
to me,
tracking
the
all this
magic
thing.
man. Well, first of all, I was wondering, like, what's Pennsylvania? Like, for those of us who are living on this side of the world, can you say a few words? What is Pennsylvania? Is it like a famous place? Who lives there? Like, and
white
why
people,
Pennsylvania? Like, what's that?
just white people, basically.
Stop
Is
it.
it the Amish, like the place where the Amish, is it that one, or that was a different state?
The
It is
Amish
that
is
one,
in
right?
Pennsylvania, but they're also in Ohio. They're also in that kind of north.
They,
What do you call
like
Pennsylvania? Is it northeast?
they like corn, the grassy, marshy lands where they can hide. That's the kind.
Pennsylvania is
I'm
the
loving
home
this.
of
I'm loving this
of
because it's just,
Pittsburgh, the steel mill
oh,
capital
right.
of America, the salt of the earth backbone of the great United States of America. That's what Pennsylvania is.
Scranton.
Don't be
Got it.
disrespecting.
And
Don't be disrespecting
I
these
am
people.
absolutely no. I'm honest. Like I tell you that maybe for people who live in the states, they don't understand the people outside of the states. They're not very familiar with all these things. Just to give you an example, a couple of years ago, I landed in New York, and I go in a taxi and I give the hotel address. So and the guy there, he says, "Oh, so you're going to Manhattan?" And I'm like, I have no idea what is Manhattan. I'm just going to this hotel. So he's like, so to Manhattan. I said, I don't know. That's a reality. That's why I'm asking. Like, perhaps it's difficult to see the world from the outside, but that's how it looks. And to me, the question was, why Pennsylvania? That's interesting. I would say that any kind of smart investor at the moment, at this particular
wait, guys,
moment in time,
what are we talking about? Like, we need to explain, like, what about this
I just set
Pennsylvania?
it up.
No,
I just
like, how does Pennsylvania come into this picture? Like, I'm listening. I'm just like, what are we talking
was
about?
my
We're talking
question.
about
Let me
Why?
repeat what I said at the top. Pennsylvania lawmakers have introduced legislation to permit its treasury to hold up to 10% in Bitcoin on its balance sheet. This is a strategic reserve bill modeled after the Satoshi Bitcoin advocacy framework. It just feels like big US states are starting to pour into this El Salvador model of saying, hey, we can't miss out on this thing.
Yeah, we can't miss out on how well it went for El Salvador.
Well, you can't argue now. It's probably going well for them when you look at the valuation in these prices. Put a bow on this conversation, Costin. We're now on 48 minutes in, and it's starting to
absolutely. So, like again, I would say that at this very precise moment in time, any kind of fund, let's say manager, any kind of a smart investor, if you want, who is looking around for ways to fight against inflation, like to maybe find some kind of a buffer or to mitigate the potential effects of recession, depression, and so on. is looking for ways to diversify their investments. So for sure, Bitcoin is attractive because, again, the upcoming administration, they all said, Bitcoin is going to be big. So what I see here is just ways to mitigate the risk. It's all about risk management. So I wouldn't laugh. I was not laughing at all. I was just surprised a bit that it's not happening in more states. So if we can maybe talk again about this topic the next week, you're gonna see that there's gonna be the same happening in more states. I see
I don't.
Juan loves the
I'm.
topic.
Juan,
I'm.
you
I'm,
get the last. You get the
I'm
last word, my
having.
friend.
I'm having severe heartburn here because we would be balking if Pennsylvania announced that 10% of their strategic reserves is going to be put in casino chips over the next few years, and they consider that a strategic investment. And I say that because this thing is not tied to literally anything. It's just a speculative roller coaster, and that's what we're seeing, right? Like Bitcoin has not gone up
I
to a hundred
disagree.
thousand.
I
I don't think
disagree.
it's gone up
You
to
know
a
what
hundred thousand
matters?
dollars
What
because some
matters
great
is a
value was
story.
made.
It's always the story, like the story behind that. Uh,
That's
for
speculation.
anything in the world, the US dollar, what matters for the US dollar is the story. The fact that behind the US dollar is the world's biggest army, most powerful army in the world. That's what gives things value. And here I think that with Bitcoin, what gives Bitcoin value is the story.
It's not the whole of what gives the dollar value, right? Like the dollar also encompasses a great deal of like GDP and production and industrial capability and an expanding and contracting economy and the ability to trade in between all kinds of existing consumer goods and international exchanges with no question as to its value or your ability to
And the US
withdraw or
army.
put money into it. I'm just saying, like, any economy, any currency tied to an economy is an abstraction of the value of that economy. Bitcoin is a speculative vehicle because it goes up whenever some fucking autistic tool decides to like go on TV and pump up its value, and it goes down at random when people decide they want to buy more Rolexes on the secondary market instead of. And it also doesn't have a clear means of exchange because it's not transactional.
Guys,
So
we have
like,
an entire country funding a nuclear program on this thing, and you're dismissing it as people buying Rolex watches.
but they're
We
funding an
can't have it both
entire.
ways.
Remember the discussion we had, I don't even know what episode, where it's like you have it as a means of money laundering in which you're losing a significant portion of your value, and what you're doing is Bitcoin is a mechanism for laundering money at a certain variable percentage. And other people along the way can get rich or poor as that goes along. And they are the greater fools in that they're the ones providing the means by which others can cash out,
You're
right?
dismissing it as nothing, and we have a ransomware epidemic that's only there because this Bitcoin exists. Like, this is the raw
Because I'm not
reality.
dismissing it as nothing. I'm dismissing it as simply a money laundering mechanism. And we have a ransomware epidemic that is dependent on that money laundering mechanism. And I'm
I
glad
politely disagree with that. I think the
Don't
biggest
be
money
polite.
laundering
you can be
solution in
impolite.
the
It's
world is
okay.
cash. That's it, cash.
Dude, cash
People
is
with
hard.
bags of cash under their desks.
Cash,
I'm gonna stop
cash
the recording
erodes.
because
Cash erodes. Cash turns to dust, man. Like you have, it's hard. It weighs. You have to move it physically. Bitcoin is a much better mechanism than cash.
it's also way too confusing. Costin tried to get me to invest $100 in this Tanase VPN fail coin thingy, and I gotta do
Tanase coin.
25,000 different things with a wallet over here and put something over here, and there's some magic numbers that have to go over here, and I'm like, dude, I'll put my $100 up on E-Trade and buy one
Nvidia
share
stock.
of.
What was
What
it?
can I
Nvidia
buy with
stock.
Tanase coin? Is it do you get the full
VPN.
Romanian boyfriend experience with Tanase coin, or do you go just VPNs?
Guys, leave
You
Tanase
you
alone.
buy
I love
VPNs
Tanase.
for the poor people in Iran who can't access the internet because of traffic being blocked.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's the wrap on episode 21. Juanito, have a safe trip back. Hopefully you get a flight out. Costin,
Thank you.
lasting shout outs?
Panase, of course, our
Of
good
course.
friend, as well as all our good friends in Romania, in this part of the world. I mean, again, no prepositioning. If you ask me, there's no prepositioning happening. Things are quiet. Christmas is coming. Please don't do anything rash. You know
No
who I'm talking
prepositioning,
about.
no collusion, you know.
Dude,
Don't do
big thank
anything
you.
rash.
A big thank you to the Echo Party folks for allowing you to pump the podcast on their show. I couldn't understand what your Spanglish is and what Fedi's Spanglish is, but I heard Three Body Problem and I heard my name once or
right.
How
twice.
do you
So
say three-body problem in Spanish?
That's a good
La problema de tres amigos.
that's
bye.
there you go. There you go.
Bye.
That's
Bye, guys.
thanks everyone.